Hello and welcome to Comic Culture. I'm Terrence Dollard, a professor in the Department of Mass Communication at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. My guests today are writers Thomas Sniegoski and Jeannine Acheson. Welcome to Comic Culture.
Hi, thanks for having us.
So you are the co-writers of the new book from the Vampiverse called The Vamp. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that book.
The Vamp spins out of the original Vampiverse series that Jeannine and I wrote for Dynamite this year. She's one of the many versions of Vampirella that exist in the various multiverses throughout the Vampirella universe. And she was the one that we enjoyed the most. She's the one that had the most potential. She's like a 1930s pulp adventure type version of Vampirella with supernatural abilities and stuff. Very much like the Shadow, Spider, or Dark Savage, things like that.
And it's interesting because, you know, up until, I guess, Into the Spider-Verse, the idea of a multiverse was something that was, I guess, really hard to explain if you weren't in that, you know, group of comic fans. But now it's something that we can talk about and we can explore. And there's the new Spider-Man movie came out, and then we've got the Doctor Strange. So what is it about the freedom of a multiverse that you two enjoy as writers?
Oh, God, you want me to take that? I'll take that one, too.
Well, but you know what? It's interesting that you mentioned people who aren't necessarily familiar with the Spider-Verse, because I'm very new to comics. And for some reason, our book, Vampiverse, it just kind of clicked for me right away. And I'm not wasn't a huge comic person, but it just kind of made sense to me. So
what does that say about you?
I don't know.
I think that the best way to talk about these various universes and stuff is that it allows you to take something familiar and put a spin on it that's unfamiliar. So it takes something that you're used to doing. I wrote Vampirella in the 90s. I wrote Vampirella, Vengeance of Vampirella recently for the last couple of years. So it allows me to look at that character from a completely different perspective and do something different with her that I'm allowed to do because it's a Vampirella from another universe or another reality or whatever.
It's interesting too because as comic fans, we are used to this idea of continuity. I mean, DC was wed to it so much that they sort of rebooted everything in the 80s with their Crisis series. But now we see that fans are really into these alternative versions, and even DC is embracing this with their Bombshell line or the Justice League Dark or something like that. So as you get to reimagine this character Vampirella into something in a completely different decade, I'm thinking about the sort of story that you might write if it's Vampirella in contemporary times with the contemporary continuity. But as you create your whole new world, what sort of pieces are you putting in there, and where are you getting those inspirations from?
I think a lot of our inspiration came just from pulp. That you've written a lot of.
Yeah, a lot of for the Vamp, it was strictly the pulp stuff. The Shadow. I said the Spider, even Indiana Jones. I mean, you kind of tap into that kind of what there's a certain level of expectation that people have with pulp fiction. Mad scientists, Yetis in the Himalayas, an orangutan butler. Just these crazy concepts that I was just picking and choosing. She's not all that familiar with pulp, so she was very inquisitive about what does that mean exactly. So I'm handing her, you read this, read this, read this. So yeah, that's where the Vamp comes from. The other characters that we created for the Vampiverse series, there were tons of different Vampirellas. It was just dipping into different genres. Oh, what would a Western Vampirella be like? What would a samurai Vampirella be like? Well, you know what I mean? So it was just kind of tapping into the existing genres in comics and books and movies and stuff like that.
Pulps have a certain, visual style or certainly, time of day when these stories kind of take place. So is this something that you're working with an artistic partner? Is this someone that you are, you're giving them the information that you think would be key to help set a scene, or are you sort of trusting them to interpret your words and come up with the best visuals?
Actually, a little bit of both.
Yeah, I think both. The artist that we're working with, Daniel Main, through Vampiverse from beginning to end. And I feel like we've come to a place in our relationship where we can say to him, we kind of picture it this way. It's like, 1930s, it's Art Deco. And then he just kind of runs with it and comes up with the most amazing images.
Yeah. Like he did a lot of, like, when we introduced the Vamp character in the Vampiverse miniseries, he kind of took the bull by the horns and did a lot of design and stuff that we didn't even tell him to do. Like in the story, she has this like dirigible that she gets around in. He gave it a name. He gave it a specific design. He gave it certain symbols, and it was really, really neat to kind of go, oh, we didn't come up with we didn't do any of that. He did that all himself.
So when you work with a partner who you can trust as much to come up with these great visuals, is this something where the two of you are working on the script and you provide him with the full breakdown, the way the DC style might be, or is this something where you give them the Marvel style and then you kind of go back in and try and make your dialogue ideas fit into the pages that they come in?
I've always worked full script. That's it, like since I started in comics. That was the thing that I kind of understood that best. That was the way that I like to work. So that's the way I've taught her how to do scripting and stuff. Yeah, so he's getting a full script, like a basic description of what's going on in the scene, where the characters are, what do we see in the particular shot. Though we do leave a lot of freedom, we leave a lot of stuff open for interpretation. We're specific where we need to be specific in terms of like what's coming up down the line in the story and stuff.
Now, Jeannine, as someone who doesn't have this background in comics, I'm imagining that you have to sort of learn quickly the format, the style, the language that you need to put this together with your artistic partner. So what kind of learning curve did you have, and how did you sort of work around those, I guess, lessons?
Huge! Tom's been a great teacher. The first comic that we wrote together was just a one-shot for Valentine's Day in 2021.
It was a Vampirella.
And it was a Vampirella. And he kind of off the cuff asked me if I wanted to write this with him. We had just finished writing our first novel. And I was like, or we were writing our first novel. Yeah. And I was like, sure, why not? And I was completely lost. I was completely lost. And he had given me books on writing comics, and he had given me some scripts that he had written, and then showed me layouts and showed me lettering proofs, and then showed me the final comic. So I had kind of the continuity of how it was supposed to go, but I was still completely lost. And we've been writing comics. We've got a Panther series out, and we have Vampiverse, and now the Vamp. And I have finally gotten to a place where just this last issue, I wrote 3 pages. I laid them out like completely by myself. So I feel like I'm kind of getting there, but it's a lot to learn. It's storytelling, and it's
visuals
movie making in your head, and there really is an awful lot to learn, and I have only just cracked the surface.
It's got to be a sort of an interesting way to learn. I mean, because it's not like you're a student in a class. You're someone who's got the publisher saying, I need those pages. So there's got to be a little bit extra pressure to not only do the job, but to do it at a level that they are expecting. So beyond maybe the first couple of days where you're wondering how to do it, where do you kind of feel that you hit your rhythm and you mentioned the last few pages that you just put together yourself, but when do you start to feel like, you don't necessarily need the training wheels?
I hope someday in the future. I don't know. I don't think he's ever going to say to me, all right, you go script that half of the issue and then I'll pick up where you left off. I don't think that's ever going to happen. I hope it doesn't happen. I don't know. I don't know. I think I'm always going to at least need him kind of like walking beside me, maybe without training wheels, but I'll see.
She's getting there. She's a lot harder on herself than she needs to be.
Thomas, you've taken on a writing partner, which as someone who is a successful author, that's got to be a bit of a challenge as well, because you're used to calling all your shots, and now you've sort of got someone who's got ideas of their own. So how do you kind of make this partnership work so that you are both contributing and at the same time, you feel like you're saying what you need to say?
For one thing, I don't think I would have ever asked her to be involved if I didn't think she was going to contribute something to it in some way. So that I had no problem taking her on with her own opinions. I mean, and I think she brings a very interesting perspective, especially to Vampirella, a female character. I think that's an added plus for a lot of for Vampirella and for Panther, actually. So yeah, it's more fun because I actually have somebody to kind of bounce things off of and to like, hey, what if we did this crazy idea, and to get an actual response as opposed to me sitting here inside my own head for 8 hours a day, which is for many years that was exactly what I did. So yeah, I think it's really kind of neat having that other side, that other person, that other perspective, that those other kind of like my idea filters through her thoughts, and her thoughts kind of take my idea and maybe spin it off in a different direction and stuff like that. So it's fun. It's actually it's way more fun than working alone. Completely.
Now you mentioned that you spend 8 hours a day in your office working every day writing. So as the two of you are writing together, is this something where you're in the same office, or is it something where you work on your pages and then give them to Jeannine, or is it something where it's just you both get a draft and review it?
We do a combination of like she'll come to my house like maybe two days a week where we like literally are side by side do writing. And the other times that we're together, we'll work over Skype with Google Docs. We'll have the document open and we can see each other and we throw things around that way. So there's some form of contact almost all the time when the scripts are being put together. Other than that time the last time she did, when I don't even know what I was doing. I had a crazy deadline, and she was like, "Let me take a shot at this, champ." So.
Well, it's got to be satisfying too that your partner wants to step up and work on this even without you, because you both seem to know exactly where this ship has to go in order to deliver the goods. So when the two of you write the script together, you give it to your artistic partner who puts it all together on the page, and it becomes something different than the two of you had thought up. It becomes this whole other story. Are you occasionally having to find yourself revising the direction of the dialogue, or maybe excluding something because the art just really made it pop?
We've done some like minor revisions to dialogue and stuff like that.
And I think we had one instance in Vampiverse where we literally just had to ask the artist to go back in and change one thing.
Yeah, because he left out a detail that was important to something coming later on.
Yeah.
That was like an important moment in the comic. So without that particular piece of visual cue, the ending wouldn't have worked anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's the only time we've ever had to ask him to actually go back and he didn't even redraw it. Didn't he just add a character or reposition? That's the beauty of digital art, stuff with digital artwork now, is that you can actually go in and just kind of rejigger a panel, rejigger figures in a panel.
Having to do the whole thing over.
They're having to do the whole thing over. I remember the old days when I first started in comics where that would have required somebody to do like paste up, like physical paste up, like paste something over something and redraw on top of it and stuff. So yeah, but that's it. He's really good. I mean, he nails it. Yeah, Daniel nails it. 99.9% of the time.
So when the two of you are working together, you mentioned that there was one detail that would become important as the story resolves itself. How are you sort of coming up with this? Is this something where the two of you just kind of, okay, here's an idea where this happens and then that, and then you kind of sew it together into a clear narrative? Or is it something where you have an idea of where you want something to end, and now it's like, Margaret Mitchell, she's going to figure out how Rhett and Scarlet, get together and break up?
We start with kind of a general story arc and where things are going to go from the very beginning of the series to the end.
Just kind of like, it's almost like spitballing.
Yeah.
You just kind of throw things out there and you hope that this connects to this, which connects to this, and stuff like that. The other day we were making lunch and I said, I got it. and I proclaim my genius. I was like, "Look," and she looks at me and she goes, "I can't tell if you're serious or not."
It was.
And I was completely serious. It's like literally like
It's piecing
it's
things
pieces,
together.
like making a big giant puzzle.
Yeah.
Where we just kind of like connect the dots.
Yeah. And in this issue of the Vamp, we had a general idea of what was going to happen in the issue. We knew where we wanted to go, but toward the very, very end, it's like page 27 or 28, we were like, oh, wait a minute, this isn't going to work. And then we had to like figure out how to get to the end that we needed to get to.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So we kind of switched things around and changed a couple of things.
And what was funny about this is that they said that our editor on the book was like, oh, we want to feature the first few pages of the comic in previews, so in the order book, so when people are ordering, they can see some of the artwork. Well, we hadn't even come up with a storyline yet. So basically, we wrote the first 4 pages having no idea what was going to come after those first 4 pages. That was kind of a challenge.
And to Daniel's credit, too, our artist, when we were writing, finally laying out and writing the rest of the issue, we went back and looked at the preview book and the pages that he had done, and we found that they were slightly different from the layouts that we had provided him, and they were better.
Yeah, he definitely kind of like took what we said and said, yeah, that's cool, and that would convey the story, but I can do it. I can do it way cooler this way. And he did. And that's something that I think I have always, since I've worked in comics, I've always trusted the artists to be able to maybe do it better than what I'm picturing and coming out of my head. And I always tell them that when we first start working together, is like, if you can read my words, you can basically figure out what I'm saying and do it better, then go ahead. You knock yourself out, do it better.
You talk about your time in comics, working with, in the 90s and all the way up through to now. And I'm just wondering, as we see the trends change and we see that, maybe now we're looking for these smaller stories that can be collected into a trade. When an editor gets in touch with you and says that they want to feature this story in previews, are they giving you a deadline in general, like, hey, we've got a book that we want you to do and this is the deadline for it, or are they soliciting an idea from you first before they go ahead and say, let's put it in the schedule?
Usually it's the idea first, or we come to them and say, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we did this? And then they try to see if they can fit it into their schedule, or if they even want to do it. And then usually we're plotting and stuff before it even gets solicited. The Vamp was quick.
Yeah.
I think they really knew that they wanted to do that as a one shot. Like I said, we hadn't even come up with the storyline yet. It was solicited. So we had to kind of like fudge what the story was even kind of about at that point, because we really didn't know. But yeah, the Vamp was fast. Normally there's a little more time, a little more leeway. Like at least they have an idea. Like when they're soliciting, they probably have the first issue or 2 under their belt before they're soliciting the previews.
And when you're working under a deadline, I know that perhaps a limited series is going to be different than an ongoing series. So I'm assuming they're giving you a reasonable deadline to get everything written and then a reasonable deadline for the art to get done. Is it the same sort of pressure of a monthly book, or are they able to kind of, if they haven't gotten the first issue in, they can still, push it back a little bit because they haven't solicited it to stores yet? I
find that like miniseries or one-shots are a little bit easier because it's almost like there's some leeway as to when it's going to come out. They're a little stricter when they a lot of times they have a very specific deadline as to when they want it to come out. And that's a little tighter because you've got to get the script written, you have to get it to the artist and to the printer by the time that the book is scheduled to come out. But usually they work with you. Like for example, if our editor came to us and said, yeah, I want a Vamp miniseries, when can we have it? We would then sit down and look at our schedule in regards to what else we've got going on and say, I think we could probably deliver these 4 issues or 6 issues or whatever starting at this date, and you'll get a comic like every 6 weeks after that or something like that. And then when they have artwork and script in hand, they usually then solicit. Usually after like the first 2 issues are done, you start to see the book start to show up in the previous book and stuff.
And I've been looking at your website, Thomas, and I know that you have a series of prose that you've written, a bunch of different series that you've written just in novels.
Yeah, I've written over 40 novels. Yeah.
And you've written a number of comics, and you've written adaptations of comics into novels. So I'm wondering, as you're sort of cross-pollinating all of these different styles, all of these different genres, what similarities are there in the writing, and what differences are there that let you kind of flex different muscles as you work on them?
I think the biggest difference between comics and books is comics is way more fun. Way more fun. There's a lot more freewheeling. There's a lot more like, oh, wouldn't it be funny to do this and that? Whereas books are very, very, very solitary. Yeah, I spend way too much time in my head. I have to really focus and concentrate and kind of almost like lose myself in the material. Whereas again, comics, I'm working with a partner or I'm working with an artist that I can pick up the phone and say, hey, I just saw the latest 5 pages you just turned in. Those look awesome. And there's a lot more collaboration with comics, whereas books, you are solitary for 4 months, 5 months, however long it takes you to write the book. You are like by yourself in your head. Maybe your editor bothers you to say, can I have it sooner or something like that. But yeah, those are the huge differences right there. That comics is fun, books is hard, still fun, but much harder than comics. Not to say that comics are easy, they're not, but they're more fun.
I've heard that actually from a number of different writers that comics just provides an opportunity. It's more like playing in a band as it is, as opposed to recording a solo record like Prince would all by himself.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I enjoy the book writing process. We did actually working on our first novel together. That was an interesting experience because again, I had somebody to bounce stuff off of. So that made that experience a little more fun than the solitary stuff that I was used to. So that was cool. And I've worked with collaborators before. I've worked with Chris Golden on a bunch of projects. But Chris and I, the difference between us working together was Chris and I would plot and talk and go back and then each go to our separate corners. So he would write the first 2 chapters and send those first chapters to me. And then I would do my next 2 chapters, trying to top his first 2 chapters. And it would just go back and forth like that. Whereas when we were writing the novel together, it was literally sitting either side by side or looking at each other on the screen, writing. Like I would write something and she would say, how about this instead? And she would then erase what I wrote to write something better. So yeah. So that was fun.
And
but again, there's that whole collaboration thing, which is really neat. And then there's that whole solitary, tortured artist by himself, drinking way too early.
Well, it's okay if it's coffee or prune juice. As the two of you are working together, I'm imagining, again, we take great pride in what we do. And I know if I get, someone gives me an idea, I might feel a little, my ego might get bruised. So I'm wondering how you two kind of balance that out so you don't feel like, you're stepping on each other's toes and at the same time it's this supportive, positive relationship as co-writers.
I think for me, I think he's been really good about welcoming any ideas I have. A lot of times I'll preface something with, this might not be right, or I'm just going to write something and see what happens.
Yeah.
And
this is
never
her famous one is, this is really stupid. But
yeah.
Here we go. And half the time it's stupid, but there's enough of a germ or a kernel in there to say, yeah, it's stupid, but what if we did this? And it ends up being exactly what we're looking for. So it's kind of cool.
And it's also kind of cool too that, when we always feel a little bit apprehensive about saying something, and we might preface it by saying, this is stupid, but at some point that confidence just kicks in because those kernels are there, the little nuggets of those ideas that blossom.
That's why I always say it to her. When she'll say, oh, this is stupid, I'm like, let me have it. Let's see how stupid it actually is, because there could be something there. That happened in the Vamp recently. I can't tell you what it was specifically, but I think it was a piece of dialogue, or a scene. It was a scene with the orangutan butler flying the dirigible. How often do you get to say that? She was like, "Oh, wouldn't it be funny if?" And then you could see that she totally like dismissed it and wanted to move on. And I was like, "No, back that up. What was that again? That's cool. That's funny. We should make that work because I think that's a really neat visual that helps define the character at the same time. So not only is it funny, it's a moment of definition. It's done in a panel. So yeah. So it's nothing stupid.
Yeah.
Nothing stupid.
It's definitely hard for me overcoming that fear of saying something stupid, which, given my history, is insane because I used to teach 7th grade. And I would always encourage my students to talk and to talk things out and to participate. And now sometimes I feel like the, shy 7th grader going, I don't know about this, but so I'm trying to take my own advice and like just put it out there and see what happens. Getting a little easier.
They are telling us that we've run out of time. I want to thank both of you for taking time out of your schedule to talk with me today. It's just flown by.
No, really?
It really has.
Crazy.
I'd like to thank everyone at home for watching Comic Culture. We will see you again soon. Comic Culture is a production of the Department of Mass Communication at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke.